Coming up next on Tech News Weekly, I'm Jason Howell, and my co-host Mikah Sargent and I speak with a couple really awesome people, starting with Rene Ritchie, who walks us through the details of Apple's big hardware event. Then we have Mishaal Rahman from XDA Developers, who has new information about Google's Tensor chip. Kind of ends up being Apple's chip versus Google's chip in today's episode. And then FTC has new rules for health apps that ensures that they notify customers when breaches happen. That's really good for consumers. And finally, lasers. They do the darndest things. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 201, recorded Thursday, September 16th, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. If you're interested in a career in IT, you need to learn the fundamentals and make sure your certs are up to date. IT Pro TV is the best place to learn IT for Microsoft, AWS, Linux, and more. Visit itpro.tv/TNW for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use code TNW30 at checkout.
And by CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike harnesses the power of every click, every action, and every ally to grow stronger and stop cyber threats before they can stop you. Join the fight and experience the power of Falcon Platform for free today at crowdstrike.com/twit.
And by Udacity. Gain in-demand tech skills in as little as 3 months with Udacity's part-time online tech courses. Visit udacity.com/twit and get 75% off any program with code TWIT75, limited time offer.
Hello, and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other guy, Jason Howell. Good to see you, Mikah. And I feel like today, I think I know what we're going to talk about this week. If anything, has been defined by one major thing, one major event. Yeah. There was one major event that took place this week, as well as some other non-major events. But right.
I thought now would be a good time, given that we didn't get to see him earlier this week on MacBreak Weekly. I subbed in for him while he was out. Excited to say that we have the Rene Ritchie joining us here on the show to talk all things Apple event. Hello, Rene.
Hello, Mikah.
All right. So I know you have been busy, making videos and learning about these new devices and kind of going on a deep dive of understanding, which is what I always appreciate about the work that you do. So let's sort of rewind to the Apple event, which took place earlier this week. And it started, of course, with Apple TV Plus. We basically got to see some of the shows that are already here, some of the shows that will be coming in the future. And Apple kind of did some bragging about its very, very popular Ted Lasso show. But after that, then we started to get into hardware. So can you tell us about the first hardware announcement from Apple's event?
So we got an updated version of the iPad Nothing, the ninth generation, just iPad, the classic OG iPad. And that's the one that's been $329, a little bit less if you're education pricing enabled. And Apple just keeps updating it steadily. They've updated it every September for the last few years. It's basically like an iPhone SE that gets updated more often. And it's their most popular iPad because it is so inexpensive. And it doesn't have all of the latest technologies, but Apple's been pretty good at pushing down more and more technologies to it. So it already works with the keyboards, works with the original Apple Pencil. And now it has an A13 processor in it as well, which means that it'll be snappier, sure, to use, but it'll also get software updates, iPad OS updates for the next 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years, which just makes it a better value to schools and anyone who's iPad curious who wants to get in on it.
Yeah, it was interesting. Apple seemed pretty clear about what that iPad Nothing, as we've called it, what it's for. And they talked a lot about using it as a sort of video conferencing or video chat device, and then it seems pretty heavy on education. Can you talk about? I find this peculiar, and I'm curious what kind of surrounds this. It does not support the second generation Apple Pencil. Instead, it works with the first generation Apple Pencil. Can you tell me why that first gen Apple Pencil is still around, and kind of if you had some sort of understanding or thought as to why Apple keeps that one around and uses it with certain devices?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we'll get to the iPad mini in a second, but now that the iPad mini's been updated, this is the only iPad that still uses Lightning. It's the only iPad that still uses the original Smart Connector, the only iPad that still uses the original Apple Pencil. And I think it's exactly for that reason. There are much lower end tablets, mostly video players, that are extremely popular, but they're mostly only used for video playing. And this has full iPad functionality, but Apple wants to maintain that $329 price so they can throw in a better processor because they think that's a good value. But the other stuff, they have to make their bill of goods. That's what anyone who's building a bill of materials, anyone who's building a device knows what their budget is for components, and they allocate that depending on what's important to them. And Apple's clearly saying that they think a lot of people are fine with that original pencil, fine with that original keyboard. They just want a really, modern processor in there, and that keeps the price down for them.
Got it. Yeah. I kind of at this point go, okay, if it's using that original Apple Pencil, it definitely feels like it's aimed at the education market in a big way. And then, in some other markets as well, but particularly with some of the third-party options that are available there for
the screen's still not laminated.
Work.
It's like you and I would look at it aghast, but everyone else is just, I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So yeah, now we can talk about the big announcement that is actually quite small. I personally was pretty pumped about Apple's announcement for the iPad mini. Let's talk about how this little thing packs a punch.
Yeah, I mean, it basically got the iPad Air design that Apple used last year, but just in mini form factor. So the bezels got snapped down to about 3/4 the size. The home button got blipped out of existence. You've got Touch ID now and the power button. Because they kept the same Apple Pencil 2, they didn't make a mini Apple Pencil 2. They had to move the volume buttons to the top, but I think that's overall fine. And then it got the same sort of industrial design. Didn't get quite as many colors, which I'm a little bit salty about. I love me some colors. It did get purple. It didn't get green for you, so I was actually sad personally for you, Mikah.
Yeah.
But I think overall, it's the mini redesign that many fans have been waiting for.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the iPad mini a little bit more. What is sort of looking back on your understanding of the iPad mini and where it's fit in the lineup, and in your work at iMore originally, and then in your YouTube, what has traditionally the iPad mini device, what has it been used for by consumers? Sort of, if you've got this bigger iPad for education, where does the iPad mini fit other than in my pocket whenever I get it?
Yeah, so I mean, like Steve Jobs was famously originally completely opposed to the idea of a small tablet, and Eddie Q got a Galaxy Tab and had to talk him into it. And I think in the beginning they thought it would be like a lower cost iPad, but it turned out that for some people the size was not a bug, it was a feature, and they wanted a premium experience. So the iPad Mini has never been it was originally the cheapest iPad, but it's never been a cheap iPad. So I think that's been reserved for the older refreshed iPad, and the iPad Mini really is just always been a smaller Air. I guess technically the Air is a bigger Mini. That they've always been sort of in lockstep with design and features and functionality. So this really appeals to people who want the portability side. They don't care as much about screen size, but like me or a Notco want to be able to slip it into the back pocket of our non-hipster jeans, take it around everywhere, read our comic books, watch our videos, write out our notes, all of those sorts of things. And because Apple has no foldable, or for people who just don't like foldables, this is the closest you can get to a real pocket computer from Apple that has a more generous screen size.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, very sad that they did the iPad Air in green, but they did not do the iPad Mini in green.
Why do you hate Mikah?
Why? It's so sad. But there was another device that did get a green update, which is... So this is why I'm glad to be talking to you about it, because from the outside, it certainly seems like not a whole lot has happened to the next generation of the Apple Watch, the next series, I should say, for the Apple Watch. What's going on with Apple Watch Series 7?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends. If you're conspiracy minded, the reason Apple doesn't pre-announce and the reason Apple hates leaks is because they quite often work on more audacious updates and then more conservative updates, because sometimes the more audacious ones don't always pan out. And this year there were a ton of leaks about a more massive redesign and maybe feature set that either was not planned for this year, but a future year, or just didn't work out this year. So we got something that's sort of in the middle. It got a bigger screen, which I think is good, because you can, as long as you don't make the watch itself monstrous, the bigger the screen, the better. So I really love that. It got some new colors. It didn't get the squared off edges, and the health sensors that all of us are waiting for. Apple every year works on them and buys new companies that swears that they're very close to them. And it's just, they always remain years and years out. So like blood sugar and blood pressure and all of these things are always coming and never quite arriving. But I think the goal of the Apple Watch is still very different. The market is nowhere near saturated. Even iPhone owners most of them still don't have Apple Watches. So what Apple does every year is try to reduce the roadblocks, the things that are making people not buy Apple Watches, and increase the feature set, ever so slightly to encourage more people to get it. So this year it's more resilient. It's got a crack-proof screen, which appeals to people who do more extreme forms of outdoor, biking or mountain climbing, those sorts of things. It's got that bigger display. It's got a wider variety of colors, and there's no real pressing need until they can really do a huge leap forward with the health stuff. I think this is sort of the iterative updates we're going to get for a while.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that I would be remiss if we didn't briefly touch on some of the conversation surrounding the rumor mill and sort of what was announced, what wasn't. And you did mention it there just for a sec, but I know that going into this, there was some external expectation that we would see a flat-sided Apple Watch, and that there were some other kind of tidbits that were lost in that didn't end up coming to these devices. And for those of us who are in the press that are part of have been part of this for a long time, we know that all rumors always have to be taken with a grain of salt. But what are your thoughts just in general kind of on this particular event, and why maybe it seems that people are getting a little bit more schadenfreude joy for some reason out of lots of rumors being wrong?
I'm a big fan of personal responsibility. So like if you want to read the script for a new Marvel movie or Star Wars movie before it comes out and things change, because a lot of stuff is done on the day, you're going to see a movie that's ultimately different and has fewer surprises for you. And if you want to look at leaks for products, you're going to ultimately, or even like some companies famously leak their own stuff. Microsoft, because of their enterprise predilections, would announce product roadmaps years in advance and often not hit those roadmaps. So it's like really there's expectational debt, as our friend George Adao would say, or like expectations are the thief of joy, as Marquez said recently. You go, if you want to look at that stuff, that's fine. That's your choice. You look at it, but that doesn't bind the company to those things. And plans change, production becomes more complicated. Sometimes things are moved up, sometimes they're moved back. So just understand that what you're looking at is one of the many multiple multiverse possibilities from the what if universe, and not necessarily our universe.
That's a very good way.
Maybe we have the Captain Carter, Captain America. That could be.
Yes, the Loki iPad Mini is in another timeline.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not this.
The
one.
Alligator Loki iPad Mini is the best one.
Exactly. All right, then let's move on to the big O's, the big devices, the ones that folks typically count on at a September Apple event, and that is Apple's next range of iPhones, iPhone and iPhone Pro, both with the 13 number. I have to say, Leo and I, we covered this event earlier this week, and it got to be an hour, and they had just finished talking about iPhone, and we thought, are they going to not announce an iPhone Pro this time? And then the event just went longer, and so there was an iPhone Pro. But tell us about what's new in the iPhone and I should say what's new in the iPhone 13, what's new in the iPhone 13 Pro.
All right, but I got to be real careful because I know Jason's sitting there ready to drag me and just, with the features Androids have had for years now, I'll get roasted if I don't do this really carefully.
That's right.
That's right. I know it's got the checkbox already. So this is what, it's very much an iPhone 12s style year. And that's the names are always just a marketing decision, but it's the chassis of the iPhone 12 with much improved camera systems for the 13, much improved camera systems for the 13 Pro. It's got the latest generation Apple Silicon, the A15, which is, there's no new process shrink. Like it didn't go from 5 nanometers to 4 or 3 nanometers this year. So it's more like a 10% improvement. But Apple is spending that transistor budget that they have on post-core things, I think is a good way to say it, because the GPUs and CPUs are only going to get so fast before you start running into thermal envelopes or battery capacity issues, or just like you're over accelerating the chip. And Apple has been very clear in the past that sort of performance is a side effect of efficiency, and they've gotten really better efficiency this year, which means an hour and a half better battery life on the Mini and the Pro, and 2.5 hours better on the regular iPhone 12 and iPhone 13 and 13 Pro Max. But they've spent a lot of their budget this year on the camera pipelines, the video pipelines especially. So we're getting cinematic video with rack focus, which I can just imagine Trinity Caldwell's, mutual friend Trinity Caldwell's face when they announced this, because it's what she used to laboriously do manually every year. Now they use machine learning. So if you see eyes that are close to the frame, it locks on those, and then if those eyes turn away, it goes to the next set of eyes, and racks basically follow focuses to that next set of eyes, and when the closer set of eyes turn back or come into frame, it moves back and forth, and it'll do that also if the eyes go away. It'll focus on items in the scene, and you can do it manually. And the part that's really cool is it saves all this data to the video so that you can go back in post and change the place of focus, change the depth of the bokeh, all of these things, which used to be almost ridiculous in hardware for a camera, but they're doing it with that processing power from the A15, which means it's not only calculating that frame of video, it's calculating the nearest neighbor frame so that the bokeh doesn't change and the focus doesn't change in between frames, which would be hella annoying. And it is limited to 1080p 30 for now because there's just not enough compute power to go to 4K yet. But the results looked really good in the demo. I mean, for a phone, it's not going to beat a red cinema camera with a dedicated Hollywood focus puller, but for a phone, it looked pretty amazing.
Yes, definitely impressive, and it'll be fun to play around with that. I think the battery life, of course, was a big thing that we thought, wow, because already the phone, my iPhone 12 Pro Max, I don't have to charge during the day. And so even more battery life stacked on top of that, it's going to be quite nice. This time we got a lighter blue color for the Pro line, which is different. It's finally a bright light color as opposed to these deep, very serious colors that they've done. So we'll see where that goes. Any other kind of tidbits before we say goodbye? Any other tidbits that maybe we could have missed during the show that you want to talk about?
Well, it's not so much a tidbit, but one of the things that Apple isn't always first to things. They don't yote first !11 into the comment section of hardware very often. And with ProMotion, 120 hertz refresh rate, other phones have done it for years, but a lot of those implementations, I know my previous Google Pixel phone, if the brightness got too low, it would shift the frame rate. It would ramp it back down again. And some of them, some of the Samsungs, they would lose color management when you changed frequent refresh rate, or they change resolution. You have to pick between the two, or they just they simply couldn't manufacture LTPO OLED panels at the quantity that Apple needs, which is hundreds of millions of units. And this year, I'm going to put a huge finally, I think a Gruber approved finally on this one, and say that we got not just 120 hertz, but a really good implementation that goes all the way down to 10 hertz, all the way up to 120 hertz, but not just based on the content. They actually built into the silicon pipeline an always-on coprocessor for touch sensitivity. So as your finger slows down and speeds up on the screen, it'll slow down and speed up the refresh rate from that 10 hertz if you pause to that 120 hertz if you're scrolling, or maybe 30 or 60 hertz if you're on a menu for a game, and then 120 hertz when you start playing again, which means that ludicrously, even though the iPhone 13 Pro has up to 120 hertz now, it's getting even better battery life than the same sized iPhone 12, which has a regular 60 hertz screen. And I think it's those kinds of implementation details where Apple is, again, sometimes frustratingly slow, but often nails it in the landing.
Yes. I thought that was really cool where they showed that on screen, the finger kind of moving around and how it adapted as it was going on. Well, Rene Ritchie, of course, folks should head over to youtube.com/Rene Ritchie so that they can stay posted on the videos that you're putting out there. And I want to thank you, of course, for joining us. Other than youtube.com/Rene Ritchie, where should folks go if they want to follow your work?
MacBreak Weekly every Tuesday right here on TWiT. Me, Leo, Alex, Andy. It is a good time for everybody.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rene. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Rene. Good talking with you. Good hearing about all those features that Android had first. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. It's like a tennis match. It goes back and forth every single year. It's kind of crazy. As a result, we all end up with great phones. That's the best part. Up next, we're going to balance out the Apple news with a look at Google's upcoming Tensor chip. We actually have some exclusive details. We're going to talk all about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. If you're looking to get a career in IT, in the IT space, or go further in your IT position that you already have, well, that's what IT Pro TV is all about. It's the best place to learn IT, as well as update your certifications. 7 studios, more than 5,800 hours of IT training with IT Pro TV. And that just creates the perfect environment for you to learn IT. Now, September's theme, we're in the midst of it right now, about halfway through at IT Pro TV, is all about Microsoft. So they're going to be featuring more than 800 hours of Microsoft content this month. They'll also have a free weekend that's coming up the 18th through the 19th. That includes PowerShell and Azure training. So you do not want to miss that. IT Pro TV is a Microsoft expert and can make you one too. You can check out their courses on MTA Windows Operating System Fundamentals. That's $98,349. MTA Security Fundamentals. That's $98,367. And Microsoft Azure. That's AZ500. And that's just a few of them. They have so many more for you to look at and to choose and ultimately to view. The best part about IT Pro TV is their edutainers. They actually make learning IT interesting and fun. You're going to get the most up-to-date information while preparing for those exams with brand new content from the studio to their course library within 24 hours. Now, IT Pro TV values your time. Those courses are divided into 20 to 30-minute episodes, fully searchable transcripts, so you can get right. If you've got a very specific thing that you want to find, you want to locate, well, that makes it really easy to do so. Edutainers are on staff and available every day if you happen to need assistance along the way. They're the official video training partner for CompTIA. And IT Pro TV's courses, they're live, very similar in many ways to what we do here at TWiT. They're live, but they're also on demand worldwide. You can watch them on any number of devices and hardware: Chromecast, Roku, Apple TV, PC, iOS, Android apps. You name it, you can find a way to watch IT Pro TV. And you can learn anytime from the comfort of your own home and, more importantly, on your own schedule. If you're interested in a career in IT, you need to learn the fundamentals and make sure your certs are up to date. Go to itpro.tv/TNW and make sure and use the code TNW30. That tells them that you got this code and this link from us. It also gives you 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription. That's itpro.tv/TNW. Make sure, again, to use that code TNW30. You'll get that additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription, and you're going to be really happy that you did it. IT Pro TV, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey along the way. Great having them on board for so long, and we know you're going to love it. So IT Pro TV, check it out for yourself. All right. Mentioned a little bit the new iPhone, the A15 Bionic chip that's inside. Apple's been doing their own thing with their silicon for the last couple of years now, and it's been working pretty darn well for Apple. Google, on the other hand, we're kind of venturing into the era of Google's own silicon. And so we've got the Tensor chip, which is what Google's calling it, the Google Tensor chip. It's going to be found inside of the upcoming Pixel 6 and Pixel 6 Pro. That's going to be coming out sometime in the next couple of months. I'm guessing probably the end of next month-ish, somewhere around there. That seems to follow previous kind of patterns. Mishaal Rahman from XDA Developers actually published an exclusive look at the specs of the new chip because we have more details thanks to a source close to XDA. Mishaal is here with us now. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back on, Jason.
Always a pleasure. And I love that we get the opportunity to do it because when you put exclusive in your headlines at XDA, I know I'm reading through it. You guys have just some great sources, especially on something that is so kind of followed by Google fans and Android fans. We want to know all about what's coming up without firing off my my assistant like I just did. And so let's it's par for the course in this job. So let's start with the details that Google, at least at this point, has officially shared. What can you tell us about what they've detailed about the Tensor chip before we get into kind of the leaks and everything?
So Google has actually surprisingly unveiled very little information about the chip themselves. We've seen so many teasers from them about the Pixel 6. They've already announced the names. They're showing it in stores, although you can't get your hands on one. But apart from the name of the chip, which, as you said, is the Google Tensor, they've only confirmed a few high-level details, including the fact that its Tensor Processing Unit, or the TPU, will be employed to run the company's HDRnet computational photography software on every frame in a video. So basically, the company's industry-leading HDR plus software that currently runs on photos that you take from the Pixel phone will be run on every single frame in a video. So hopefully, the next-gen Pixel phones will be significantly improved in terms of video taking capabilities. They also mentioned that the chip will power several new on-device AI features, such as the ability to not only transcribe voice in real time, but also take that transcription and translate it in real time as well. And finally, they also mentioned that they will be introducing the second generation of their Titan M module. That's hardware security module that they include in Pixel phones since the Pixel 3, I believe. And they haven't specified exactly how that module has been improved, but they told us that it's the second generation module and it'll be called the Titan M2. Apart from that, they haven't mentioned anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, Google's doing the trickle effect. They have their strategy of releasing enough early on ahead of the official release of this stuff, which they've been doing for the last couple of years, kind of a strategy, it seems anyways, to get ahead of some of the leaks, to allow them to kind of control some of the messaging. That doesn't mean other information doesn't come out. It just means that it gives them the opportunity to kind of set the stage for what people are talking about leading up to it and getting more excited about it. We've had some other details kind of come to light along the way as well. Again, before we get to the CPU, which is kind of the primary stuff that you were able to get insight into, we've had some details about the modem, about the GPU, and I mean, either of those details, is there anything that really stands out to you from what we've gleaned on that? I mean, I know the modem, I keep reading that it's likely a Samsung modem for 5G. Like, why is that significant considering we're talking about Google Silicon here?
So it's significant for several reasons. First of all, when we first learned that Google was working on its own silicon for upcoming Pixel devices, it was heavily reported that Google will be designing the chip in collaboration with Samsung, and they'll be having Samsung fabricate the chip. So learning that it will use the Samsung Exynos 5123 modem, which is the rumored modem in question, basically confirmed those rumors. It's first of all good to know that a lot of those early rumors from mid 2020 are accurate. And the second reason it's significant is because to date, there have been very few 5G devices sold in the United States without a Qualcomm modem. There have been a very small handful of devices with MediaTek chipsets, and they've only been released within like the past 2 months, I think. So Google shipping a device in the US with a Samsung 5G modem, I think that would be the first, because Samsung doesn't even ship their own 5G modems in their own phones in the US. They still use Qualcomm.
Right. Okay. And I mean, I suppose that in some ways allows Google to kind of focus more of its attention on what the Tensor can do. And like you said, a lot of that has to do with AI processing. That seems to be what they're really talking it up in advance. And that's a great thing. Don't get me wrong, because Google is a really great AI company when it comes to usability of these smartphones. A lot of my favorite features kind of hinge on that AI capability underneath. So if this is going to improve that, that's great. But I think a lot of people, myself included, would love to know that, hey, if Google's creating a new system on a chip for their devices, that they're taking everything into consideration, and things like just the usability of the phone outside of AI, like, speed of the processor and everything, that it's going to be capable, if not better than what's like comparative, if not better than what's already out there. So that leaves kind of the CPU as a large part of that. There was a Geekbench listing for the Pixel 6 Pro that came to light. It seemed to fill at least some of the gaps, but of course, like I mentioned earlier, you at XDA have a source that has an actual Pixel 6 Pro in their hands. Talk a little bit about kind of what we're learning there around the CPU configuration of the Tensor chip, and not just the configuration of it, but what that actually translates into for, say, an everyday user, if that's even possible at this stage to understand.
So first of all, what we learned about the CPU configuration of the Google Tensor chip is as follows. We learned that it will very likely have 2 Cortex-X1 cores clocked at up to 2.8 gigahertz, followed by 2 Cortex-A76 cores clocked at up to 2.25 gigahertz, and 4 Cortex-A55 cores clocked at up to 1.8 gigahertz. So none of these cores are custom. They're all off the shelf. They are designed by ARM. And you'll find a lot of these cores in other chipsets designed by Samsung and Qualcomm. But what's unusual about the Google Tensor chip is the number of cores and the pairings of these cores. So the Google Tensor chip, if these specifications are accurate, and we believe they are, would be the first chip to have 2 Cortex-X1 CPUs. The Cortex-X1 is currently ARM's most powerful Cortex CPU on the market, and Qualcomm's and Samsung's latest chipset each only have one of them. So pairing 2 of them suggests it'll have a very significant power improvement. But what's unusual about this chip is that the other 2 cores that are in the performance configuration are Cortex-A76 cores. Those were actually announced in mid-2018, so they're actually several generations old. They've already been succeeded by the A77 and the A78. And various members of the media that we talked to, including AnandTech's Andre, who is one of the foremost experts on mobile hardware, he is very perplexed by Google's decision to include A76 cores rather than the newer A78, because the A78 is, according to what ARM has announced, superior in regards to the 3 key areas that any mobile chip designer would care about, which is power, performance, and area. So the reason why Google decided to include these A76 cores is something we'll have to ask Google once they actually announce the Google Tensor chip alongside the Pixel 6. It's hard for us to rationalize right now why they may have gone this route, because we don't have the full picture of the actual chip. Until we actually have a die shot where someone tears down a Pixel 6 and takes a very, very high resolution image of the chip so we can label all the on-die components, we probably won't know like how much space these CPU cores are taking up, and whether or not it was necessary for them to include these, or whether they could have gone with A78 chips, etc.
I see. So yeah, it could be space, could be cost, maybe. I mean, I suppose it's possible that Google's like, all right, we have a certain target for these chips. We have a certain target for our Pixel 6 and our 6 Pro. We don't want to end up with $1,500 phones. Who knows? Maybe they will be $1,500. I don't actually believe that, but I guess it's possible. But if Google really wanted to avoid that, like, could that be the difference here? Like adding dual A76 cores, could it be a cost savings measure more than anything?
So from what I understand, the cost saving argument doesn't really make much sense right now because, for one, the way ARM's business model works is that they license their core designs to chip manufacturing companies. And then whenever those chip design companies actually create a chip, ARM also gets a royalty from that. So the license that Google is likely paying to have 2 Cortex-X1 chips or CPUs, if they're already doing 2 of their most powerful and probably expensive CPUs, it's kind of hard to see why they wouldn't just go for 2 A78s as well. Yeah. It's unlikely that the licensing cost is that significant.
Okay, well, that's notable then. Interesting. All right, well, we know what you're going to be asking when Google actually allows for some open questions on this topic, and I'll be curious to see what that leads to. You also wrote that Google's AV1 decoder is hardware accelerated by the Tensor chip, and that we haven't really seen this before. What does that actually mean for end users?
So the AV1 codec is a royalty-free codec that is being heavily pushed by Google and various other companies in comparison to another video codec, HEVC or H.265. So these video codecs are used to encode video files in, and then whenever a device plays back those video files, it needs to have a decoder to decode those files. So the debate between AV1 versus HEVC is that HEVC requires you to pay a licensing fee, or not you, the consumer, but the company that implements a encoder and decoder has to pay a licensing fee, versus AV1 is completely royalty free. And in addition, AV1 is highly efficient at reducing the file size of video files. And as we know, video file resolutions are just getting bigger and bigger as smartphones and cameras are getting more powerful and powerful. So because video files are getting bigger, whatever you upload to YouTube or other sites are getting bigger, which means you need faster internet speeds to stream those files. So the advantage of having a codec like AV1 used is that it can compress those video files without losing significant quality. So if you were to employ AV1 everywhere, these streaming companies like Netflix, like YouTube, can save petabytes of data in the long run. And that also translates to lower bandwidth usage for consumers, which means, you're not eating up your 5G data allowance or your home internet, meter as often.
Okay. All right. That's notable. In light of what we know right now about the Tensor chip, and I realize, you wrote that there's a lot we don't know about the actual GPU. There's certain details there that are going to be really instructive as far as how that translates into the experience of using the phone and everything. But based on what we know right now and some of this more expansive information that you're collecting, is it right to compare what Google's doing against what Apple has done with its A15 chip and the ones before it? Like, are they actually going after similar things or different? Like, are we actually comparing apples to apples here, quite literally, or apples to oranges?
Well, based on what we already know about the GPU that will be used inside the Pixel 6, it's not going to be a next generation device in terms of graphical performance. The GPU is already a known quantity. It's the Mali G78. And that was already announced, and it's already been employed in several devices, including the Galaxy S21, the international variant, uses a 14-core variant of that GPU. That Mali G78 can actually have 24 cores, as seen on the Huawei Mate X2, which is Huawei's foldable device that they only sell in China. So the critical information that we're missing here is how many cores will be used in the Mali G78 found in the Google Tensor chip. That will tell us what kind of raw graphical performance we should expect. Is it going to be as fast as the Galaxy S21 or the Mate X2, somewhere in between, or slower than both? And there are other factors that determine how good the GPU performance will be, including the clock speed, how aggressive the scheduler is for ramping up the frequency, etc.
Awesome. Well, we're kind of within that realm right now as we lead up to, Android 12, probably going to get an official release sometime in the next, 2 to 3 weeks. Pixel 6, I'm guessing, going to get some sort of announcement or event, sometime in the next month. And this is all guessing, of course, but it's all to say that we're within the prime territory where these leaks start coming a lot more rapidly, and we start to learn, a lot more official information from Google as we head towards Pixel season. So I know I'm excited. I imagine you're probably, at least intrigued to see where this is heading and everything. And I really appreciate you following this so closely and coming on to share your insight about all of this with us. Thank you so much, Mishaal. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm always happy to talk about everything Google and Android. So I appreciate you for inviting me onto the show again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. XDA-developers.com for people who want to go check out this exclusive. You've got another exclusive that details more about the Pixel 6 Pro specifically. Folks should definitely check that out. If people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Best place would be twitter.com/Mishaal Rahman.
Awesome. Well, Mishaal, thank you again, and we will talk with you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mishaal. Up next, I'm going to kick off our stories of the week. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by CrowdStrike. You've seen the headlines, and frankly, we talk about it all the time here on TWiT. There are loads of ransomware attacks after ransomware attacks after ransomware attacks that are holding businesses hostage. It can feel like it's only a matter of time before they come for you. And then you'll have to decide, do you pay or do you lose everything? But you can have a third option. Do you defeat your adversaries before the fight even starts? God, that sounds really inspiring. With CrowdStrike, you're not alone in the battle against ransomware. A secure future demands a shared defense, and that's why CrowdStrike's Falcon platform uses their threat graph, powered by advanced AI, to analyze behavior on your devices, on your servers, and your cloud workloads to find the threats and stop them. Their security platform delivers the industry's most powerful set of tools to fight today's most sophisticated cyber attacks, all delivered via the cloud through a lightweight, intelligent agent. Forrester study finds that Falcon Complete delivers 403% return on investment and 100% confidence. Those are really good numbers. And this is pretty cool. We had a chance to talk with CTO Michael Santonis, and he went ahead and explained how the threat graph system is a collaborative platform.
It's the crowd in CrowdStrike, and that's the concept. The original vision was to build the fundamentals. It was to bring in all of those signals, that telemetry, and the more data we get, the more information that we have. We can use that to protect all of our customers in real time.
CrowdStrike harnesses the power of every click, every action, and every ally to grow stronger and stop cyber threats before they can stop you. Falcon Complete stops breaches every hour of every day through expert management, threat hunting, monitoring, and remediation, and is backed by CrowdStrike's breach prevention warranty. And they don't just say it, they guarantee it for Falcon Complete managed customers who receive a warranty covering up to $1 million in the event of a breach. Terms and conditions apply. Gartner Magic Quadrant named CrowdStrike a leader for endpoint protection platform for 2021. So join the fight and experience the power of Falcon Platform for free today at crowdstrike.com/twit. That's crowdstrike.com/twit. CrowdStrike, because what we've built together is worth defending together. Thanks so much to CrowdStrike for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right. I wanted to talk about this news story. This is a really interesting ruling this morning, or vote this morning by the FTC that basically says, we've had a rule. It's I think more than a decade old now. The FTC has had a rule that says, should a company that handles sensitive health information, should they have a breach of said sensitive health information, they have to notify consumers, they have to notify the FTC, and in some cases, they also have to notify the press. And up to this point, the FTC, the rule itself isn't super clear on who was covered. And more so, even if the FTC would argue that, no, it was clear from the get-go, what wasn't kind of up to snuff was the FTC's enforcement of that rule, meaning that even because they argue that this rule called the Health Breach Notification Rule, that for as long as it's existed, it also included health apps. So apps that sort of traffic in your health data, that they were included. But since health apps that have had breaches in the past that maybe didn't follow the rule and make that information available as quickly as they're supposed to, since the FTC didn't come after them, then maybe you thought it wasn't. It was sort of in a gray area space. So today, in a vote of 3-2, the FTC basically clarified this rule and said, look, this includes health apps. You also have to notify U.S. consumers. You have to notify the FTC. And again, in some cases, the media. They can read the rule to learn more about it. Essentially, this whole rule was created because there are plenty of companies that deal with health data that are not part of HIPAA. They're not covered by HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So companies outside of your typical medical records and health insurance needed to have some rules tied to them to make sure that your data was being protected, and should it not be protected, that you could be notified about it. And so that's what this rule does. Now, what's interesting to me is that it is a pretty broad definition. So they clarify that apps that collect information directly from consumers and have the technical capacity to draw information through an API that enables syncing with a consumer's fitness tracker, that counts. So almost any app that I have on my phone that's able to pull information from a fitness tracker, in this case, my Apple Watch, they are covered underneath this rule. They need to follow this rule. An app that draws information from multiple sources is covered, even if the health information comes from only one source. So the example they gave is that even if you have a blood sugar monitoring app that draws health information only from one source, like the consumer typing in their blood sugar levels, if it also takes non-health information from another source, so for example, it can pull in information from the calendar that you sync with the phone, it's covered under the rule. So even if these apps sort of wanted to say, hey, yes, we take health information, but we're only doing one thing, meaning that we're not, working with an API, we're not pulling data from elsewhere. So technically this health breach notification rule doesn't apply to us. No, if you've got integrations in the app, if you are pulling information from your phone's calendar, from your customer's phone's calendar, if you are pulling information from, the Notes app, from any other app, you are covered. And I like this too. They clarify that a breach is not just cybersecurity concerns. It's not just if someone comes along and breaks into the system and gets access to this information. It also includes sharing the information without an individual's authorization. So if these apps have been used in the past for marketing purposes to share information, they are at the mercy of this rule. And the FTC said, we haven't really done a good job in the past of enforcing this rule, but now you're on notice. it is a violation, or any violation of the rule faces civil penalties of $43,792 per violation. And you may think $43,792 per violation, that's not very much money. It's not just per violation. It is per violation per day. So for every day that you are not notifying your customers about this and that you're violating this rule, you are potentially facing a fine, or a civil penalty in this case, of $43,792. And that just keeps racking up and racking up and racking up and racking up. So it could get pretty expensive. Interestingly, there are some companies who because again, the rule itself, it's one of those where it kind of already did include apps, but just some apps were kind of going, oh no, that doesn't really apply to us. And the FTC isn't saying anything. So we don't say anything. You're not saying anything, whatever. But some apps out there went ahead and sort of followed this rule, even if it wasn't being enforced in other cases. An example of that is, I can't remember, I think it was, I can't remember who bought it, but there was a pretty popular app that got purchased by a pretty popular fitness app that got purchased by a bigger company. And when that happened, when there was a breach, the bigger company followed the rule and notified as was needed. And so yes, MyFitnessPal, thank you, Adam W. In the chat. Under Armour, thank you, purchased MyFitnessPal. I love our chat. And there was a breach, and Under Armour notified as they were supposed to. And it kind of reminded me of the movie industry, because with the movie industry, all of those ratings systems are something that the movie industry created itself. And the reason that they created the ratings and this body that is an oversight body that helps determine what ratings movies get is because they did not want the government to regulate the movie industry. And so they said, no, you don't have to do it. We're going to go ahead and take care of it. We're going to do it ourselves. And so then the government kind of turned elsewhere to work on other regulations because they went ahead and took care of it themselves. So Under Armour did the right thing, kind of followed this rule that's already here and said, we're going to do this. But other companies have not kind of followed along with this rule. And so now that this is sort of clarified, this is good. One of the things I really liked in the piece was FTC Chair Lena Khan talking about the advertising and how this played a role. Given the growing prevalence of surveillance-based advertising, the commission should be scrutinizing what data is being collected in the first place and whether particular types of business models create incentives that necessarily place users at risk. Went on to say digital apps are routinely caught playing, quote, fast and loose with user data, leaving users' sensitive health information susceptible to hacks and breaches. Given the rising prevalence of these practices, it is critical that the FTC use its full set of tools to protect Americans. So this is a real crackdown to make sure that these apps that in the past have kind of gotten to go, ooh, we're soaking up all this data, but we don't necessarily have to be as protective of this data, or in some cases can use this as an opportunity to make money on this data. Now the FTC is coming in. Now, you may be asking, okay, but it was a 3-2 vote. Why was there any dissent on protecting users' data? Well, of course, there's a lot that goes into why that happens, but I do just want to read the Hill, which has information about that. It says the vote for the policy fell along party lines, with Khan and the other two Democratic commissioners voting 3-2 in favor of the policy against Republican commissioners Noah Phillips and Christine Wilson. So it seemed to be a Democratic versus Republican decision here. And one of the Republican commissioners explained that the reason they voted not to protect consumers' health information is because there is a sort of longer term, more wide encompassing set of rules and regulations that they're working on. And so they didn't want to do this sort of piecemeal stuff in the meantime because they needed to conclude those other things first. So, take that for what it is and what you do with that, what you will. But that's why it seems to have fallen along party lines. In any case, I'm glad this clarification has taken place, and that all these different apps that, you know, we maybe in some cases take for granted the information that they're collecting are going to have to be more proactive or face some serious fines. Now, the one thing that I think is important to point out is that there is an important definition here. This is only when there's a breach, be it a nefarious breach or a sharing of data, as the rule points out, only applies to unsecured, identifiable health information. Now, I don't know how we go into a definition of identifiable, what exactly that means, because for me, I would think that means that if they anonymize this health information, then they're okay with sharing it with ad marketplaces and all that kind of stuff. So that part gets a little bit murky. And it would be interesting to hear some more from lawyers in particular about that part of the regulation. So it's not, a be all end all rule. It's not fixing everything, but I'm curious to hear you, Jason, if you feel the same way. When it comes to apps, I am happy to let the app, with health apps in particular, I'm happy to let the health app write data to my phone because of Apple's health app, which collects all of that information. Happy to let it write to that, but I'm not big on letting it read any of that information, meaning that it can access other things within my health app and sort of suck that up and send it to the cloud. And so oftentimes what I will do is only give it write permissions, not read permissions. And if it's read permissions, it is for very specific apps that are for example, health tracking. And I don't let it have access to some of the more, I don't mind if it has my calorie burn for the day and my steps for the day, but I'm not also going to give it access to heart monitoring information. So kind of the more private, more detailed, in-depth information. So I'm curious your side of things. And there's one other mention that I'll make that I completely forgot. Ember Mug is a great example of this. Love my Ember Mug. Fantastic. It keeps my coffee or whatever warm drink I have warm throughout all time. But on iOS, you can let it write and read health information so that you can track your caffeine intake. I am not interested in a smart mug company having my caffeine consumption. And so I have that feature turned off. But an app that uses my Apple Watch, a well-established app that uses my Apple Watch to provide me more insight on my heart rate and that kind of thing, I give that app permission to write and read very specific things. So it kind of depends on the app and whether I think that they are going to be using it for the purposes that I expect it to, or if they're going to be sort of making more money on that. How are you? Because first, I guess I'll ask Jason, does Google have like one app that collects a bunch of health information that you can go to? Like Apple Watch, it had this one app called Health, or not Apple Watch, but Apple in general on iOS has an app where there's one app where I can go in and not only log, but see all of the app's information that has logged my nutrient intake. So, if I use an app for meal tracking, it will tell me then how much calcium I've had in a day, how much fiber I've had in a day, how much this, how much fat, how much, et cetera, et cetera. That app also has information for my steps. It has information for my heart rate. It has information for my my doctor's records. All of that is in this one app. And then through the API, third-party apps can write to the health app and read from the health app. Is there something like that on Google? And then my second question for you is, how, quote unquote, fast and loose do you play with the health information on your device and with apps that sort of use that stuff?
Yeah. Google has Google Fit is their app that it kind of collects a lot of this information, and it's not I mean, it's fine. It's, it's not as all encompassing as some other apps like Samsung's Health app, does actually track some things that Google Fit doesn't. And you can set them up so that they talk to each other. And there's plenty of third-party apps that act as like a conduit between that and, Fitbit information, although Fitbit's now in Google, but before it was, kind of setting it up so that some of these pieces of information could pass between them. And, yeah, I mean, so it is possible for these apps to kind of talk to each other. It's also something that Android has been doing in the last couple of years, where they've been getting a little bit more. They've been controlling a little more how easily data is shared from one app experience to another, and kind of siloing them, from a file access / data perspective. So you have to be, as a user, a little bit more intentional if you want to say, yes, this app can have access to this health information that's over here. So that's good. It puts the control, at least in the consumer's hands. Whether the consumer understands that control, that's a different story. I just don't really do a whole lot of fitness stuff with my phone to begin with, and I feel like we've talked about this to some degree, maybe a couple of weeks ago when I was showing off the Galaxy Watch 4 Classic that I've been wearing. It does a lot of activity tracking and everything, but I don't really do anything with that information. Like, it's nice that it does it, but I really am not the kind of person that's like really tracking all of this information. So it's not really top of mind to me. I don't really, if that information is in the app, that's fine. I should probably be a little bit more cognizant of what's happening to that information. But, a part of me kind of has a trust of Google. If I'm throwing this stuff into Google Fit, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't trust Google on that. But I just kind of tend to be like, it's going into Google Fit. I'm not really doing anything with it. It's just kind of par for the course. But I do think that having the ability to control that for people who really do care about this stuff is essential. And I think that Google does a pretty good job with that, to my understanding. I'm sure someone else might disagree with that, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody kind of falls along different lines when it comes to this thing, and
Right.
Privacy considerations in general. But ultimately, I think if all this, and this is what this rule says, if all this rule says is that, hey, if you suffer a breach of someone's data, you have to let them know.
Yeah,
that's a really good rule.
Yeah, that's pretty good basic line of thought there for a business.
Yeah.
Hey, if something bad happened and it has to do with somebody else's data, and especially private data that can be really revealing, like health data, all data, of course, but that especially, then yeah, that's a pretty good foundation to kind of build upon. I'm definitely applaud the FTC for making that stance. I think that's good for consumers ultimately, and that's what it's all about. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that covers it for my little story of the week.
All right. Well, coming up, my story of the week, and it has to do with lasers. We're going to talk about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Udacity. Udacity offers just a really unique part-time online education program. It's a platform that's really about you. If you have interest in something that has to do with technology, maybe you want to change your career, or maybe you're just fascinated by AI or robotics or whatever, you have the ability to take these programs, nano degrees, what they call them, to really expand your technology knowledge to the next level and get really specialized along the way. Udacity offers the latest cutting-edge nanodegree programs, many of which are not available anywhere else. So AI, deep learning, flying car, autonomous flight engineer, intro to self-driving cars, machine learning engineer, robotics software engineer, all of these facets of technology, fascinating to me, but you can kind of dive in there, and maybe you already have an idea of what you're looking for. And if not, just browse through and you're going to find something in there that you're like, oh man, I would love to know more about robotics software engineering. That is fascinating. Well, that's what it's all about. You can create course content around that particular topic. Udacity partners with industry leaders to make it even better. Microsoft, Google, IBM, AWS, Basically, they're selecting the team leads at these top companies to be your instructor. So if you love learning, you're always looking to know more new tech stuff and about these topics that, might not be as ubiquitous as other things to find easily on the internet. Well, now you're learning from the people who do it, live it, breathe it. They are the leaders of their teams, and they're teaching it to you at Udacity. Udacity can help you master the latest tech skills and techniques. These courses are not just passive, watch a video and move along with your life type things. They're project-based. So it's active learning, covers cutting-edge technology, lets you test your knowledge, you get homework. Projects are actually reviewed by qualified professionals, so you're going to have a real human touch, real human feedback and reviews. You also get access to mentors 24/7. Udacity's flexible schedules also mean that you can put in the time that you have, 5-10 hours a week. You're working at your own pace any time of the day or night, whatever works for you. You could even graduate in as little as 3 months. Now, the World Economic Forum estimates that 75 million jobs are going to be replaced by automated processes within the next 3 years. And Udacity is really preparing its students for the jobs of the future. So more than 14 million people, more than 240 countries now using Udacity to expand their knowledge. And you can check out their detailed course listings. All you have to do is go to udacity.com. Now, once you enroll as a student in a specific course offering, you're going to be prompted to view the online course, as well as complete a series of projects and support courses. So you can get right in and get to work, again, not just watching, but participating. And they actually offer flexible payment options as well. So you can learn at your own pace, your own schedule, and you've got that flexibility on how you pay for it. Udacity does have some free courses as well. So you could go there right now and see if you find a free course that interests you, and you really get a sense of what Udacity is all about. Now, if you have a team that needs to master cutting edge technologies, data science, AI, who doesn't need to master cybersecurity in this day and age? Well, Udacity for Enterprise is something to look into. You can upskill your entire workforce with real-world project-based learning. Do be sure to check out the enterprise section of Udacity's website today. So it all sounds amazing, doesn't it? Now you can check it out for yourself. Get the in-demand tech skills you need to advance your career. Just go to udacity.com/twit and get 75% off any program with the code TWIT75. That's TWIT75. Limited time offer, of course. That's udacity.com/twit and enter TWIT75 as the code. And we thank Udacity for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, my story of the week, also known as frickin' laser beams, because there's two different stories that I saw that had to do with lasers that I was kind of like interested / afraid of. I mean, the first one's just kind of fascinating to me. So part one, new research at Stanford's Computational Imagination Lab shows how, Imagining Lab, or Imaging, there we go, Computational Imaging Lab, that was a typo, shows how a single laser beam that is shown into a room can actually see all of the objects in the room, like a single pinpoint laser beam. So basically a hole as small as a pinhole is all that's needed. Whatever is required to get that laser to kind of pop through the wall into the room, that laser shines in, it hits the wall on the opposite side, and then we think the laser just stops there. But what happens ultimately, based on the system, that light rebounds off the wall. Photons then reflect back through the hole. On the other side of the hole is a camera. It's a single photon avalanche photo detector that's on the other side to basically receive all of those photons. And then, as everything is ruled these days by algorithms, those algorithms then parse the data. And then what is returned is essentially a rough estimate of everything that's in that room, right? That light goes in, it bounces off of all of these objects, returns that information, that photon information to this camera, and then those algorithms can process this and come up with kind of an idea, kind of a map for, the objects, the layout. The resolution isn't necessarily high. It's not like you're going to get a perfect representation of things that are in the room, but it's high enough to know roughly what those objects are. That's a person, that's a couch, that sort of stuff. And I don't know, I'm just kind of
Do they
fascinated
have a
by
photo of
by
what
that.
the output looks like?
Yeah, if you let's see here. This is the Gizmodo article. So the article that I read is on Gizmodo. If you scroll down a little bit, I'm trying to figure out where it is. Yeah. So this is kind of an indication. So you can see the humanoid object here, right? It comes back more looking like an angel than a humanoid object. It's also very narrow and very thin. The words, the letters KEY, you can see those kind of coming back pretty accurate. So again, they're low resolution, but I'm sure, with an algorithm, and these algorithms are improving, they're going to be able to get a better readout, better understanding of what these things actually translate into. Also, people who are talented and educated enough to know how to parse what they see. Because, you can imagine, what would this be used for? I feel like with lasers, it always seems to come back to the military, right? Military or police seeing into a room that they consider to be dangerous. They want to know what's in there before they head on in. That could be a use for this. Or the less kind of violent approach on this would be autonomous navigation systems. We've got these systems on cars traveling around, and we want them to always know more than even a human could see to be as safe as possible. So that could be a way of detecting hidden hazards that to the human eye might not be easy to detect, but to a system that can scan with these lasers and those photons bouncing around might be able to detect even easier. So that's kind of a cool application, I think. It's freaking laser beams,
Yeah, so the part that I wasn't quite clear on, it's a laser shined into a room, and then you said there's something in the room that bounces it back, or nothing else has to be inside the room itself?
My understanding is nothing else has to be in the room to bounce it back. It's essentially, the idea is that you're shining the laser in, it hits that wall. When it hits the wall, it diffuses, right? Light diffuses, spreads out.
That diffusion.
That reflects off of the other objects in the room and bounces the photons back to the camera. It's probably a very highly sensitive camera that's able to pick up on all that stuff.
Okay, so then it could be pretty. Instead of using one of those super tiny little fiber optic cameras that you slide under the door to look inside, you could just bounce a laser in there and go, oh, there are 3 people in this room. And then
right, exactly, for whatever you need it for.
Interesting.
Totally. Again, usually the military, I feel like that ends up being the easy go-to for something like this. But I hope there's better uses for this stuff than just military and police, Which, speaking of military, that leads into part 2. Now, this one is definitely I feel like we had a conversation about this maybe a couple of years ago on the show, and ultimately after doing it, realized that the article was from a few years prior and that it was inaccurate. Now it seems like it's actually not inaccurate. In the UK, they awarded contracts that are going to lead to laser cannons being fitted to tanks and warships. And from this, quote, detecting, tracking, engaging, and countering unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. So that's kind of that's the starting point, but it's always the starting point. It's okay, great. So that's where we are now. What does it lead to? The project, known as Team HRSA, is actually the Ministry of Defense's Joint Delivery Office for Directed Energy Weapons. So this is an effort within the military to find these directed energy weapons and to, explore essentially the future of warfare, I suppose. The first of these lasers is going to be tested on a Royal Navy Type 23 warship. That's coming up. The lasers themselves are, they're lasers. So they're powered by electricity. There's no ammo required. You're not loading any ammunition. So I suppose there are benefits there if you're, follow, although I'm not very into following wartime stuff, but I suppose if you are on war technology and everything, that might be of interest to you. And also, by the way, this is not the first time that it's been pursued. In 2019, a French missile company worked with the Ministry of Defense, and they created an energy weapon called Dragonfire. In that case, the beam was so powerful, it melted the mirrors that were used to actually direct the laser. So it was not a success, at least in its incarnation then. But yeah, I don't know why I picked these two. It's I saw 2 stories about lasers, and
hey, it's a
12-year-old 12-year-old me was like, oh, lasers, that's cool. But, it also kind of terrifies me to think of a future where lasers, being used in warfare and stuff. Like, that doesn't sound fun, but this is the world.
Scooter X in the chat has shared another laser story about Alphabet, which of course is Google's parent company, that is beaming 700 terabytes of data across nearly 5 kilometers. As part of its, I think it was originally part of its Project Loon initiative, which was to bring internet to different places. Now there is a free space optical communications device that can connect broadband links between 2 points and beam a bunch of info, basically bringing internet to places where they can't typically, run cables. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Connecting service across the Congo River. And that's about, I think my understanding is more about infrastructure than, it's not like they're beaming a laser into your window so that you have internet. This is how you get large amounts of internet from one place to another to serve a community that might not get internet otherwise. And so I would say that's a good use of lasers. Good by my own personal
positive
judgment.
Lasers.
Yeah,
I wonder if it affects birds that fly in between them.
Yeah, I wonder, right? If they look at exactly the wrong place at the wrong time, that probably.
Or you're watching a Netflix show and then it's like, the bird makes it buffer again.
Oh, dang it! Must have been a bird. Bird in the laser
is worth 3 in the bush. Okay. I think that brings us to the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly.
Yeah, I think that's it. With the lasers, we are done. How can you beat freaking laser beams? Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. We do this show every Thursday in the morning. You can actually watch live if you like, twit.tv/live. There's folks in the Discord and chat following along. It's a lot of fun, but twit.tv/TNW if you want to subscribe, and then you don't have to worry about finding it after the fact.
And if you'd like to get all of our shows ad-free, well, you should check out Club Twit, because Club Twit is a really great program where for $7 a month, you get every Twit show with no ads. You also get access to the exclusive Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, including an AMA with yours truly, and more content coming soon as our dear Aunt Pruitt takes over the content management and is rolling out some new shows. And then lastly, you get access to the members-only Discord server, where what you just heard Jason mention, that there are some folks in the Discord. That's where Adam W. helped me remember Under Armour purchasing MyFitnessPal and disclosing that. So it's a great place to hang out with us hosts and other folks here at Twit, as well as your fellow Club Twit members. $7 a month. And you get all that magic, plus the magic warmth of knowing that you're supporting us directly and helping us continue to do these shows. If you would like to follow me on a social media network and get in touch, I am at Mikah Sargent on many a social network, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. And you should check out later today, Smart Tech Today, which I will be doing this week with the very cool science fiction author, as well as my co-host on Clockwise, Dan Morin. And not tomorrow, I forgot, we moved it to a new time. Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, I record iOS Today with Rosemary Orchard. So stay tuned for that. What about you, Jason?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Jason Howell, or you can find me all over Twit. All About Android is the other show that I do on a regular basis, twit.tv/AAA. Next week after the show live, we are planning on doing an actual Q&A with Discord as an extra thing for Discord members. So, we do little things like that for our Club Twit, but we love you all. But that's it for this week's episode. Thank you to John Ashley for being in the studio, making this show happen. Burke, everyone at the studio for helping us doing this show each and every week. And thanks to you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
So you got yourself the brand new latest and greatest iPhone or Samsung smartphone because you heard about all of the beautiful photography those things can create. But for some reason, you're just not quite getting it done when you try to make your photos. Or you got yourself a brand new camera because you were interested in getting started in photography, but your little new inexpensive camera still isn't quite cutting it. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands-on Photography, here on TWiT. I'm going to show you how to be a better photographer and a better post-processor, and quite frankly, just help you get the most out of that new camera that's either on your phone or the brand new one that you just got for your birthday or gifts or what have you. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So head on over to twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP and subscribe today.